of people know me as Tyler B. I'm a part of the Beehive Collective, which is a bunch of activists and artists and educators all working collaboratively to make these storytelling graphics like the ones you see here. We use fable-style symbolic animal characters to talk about real-life environmental and social justice issues and take topics like mountaintop removal or industrial development and indigenous resistance to it, these concepts that are hard to talk about because they're complicated and sometimes hard to talk about because they're really heavy, and we make them more approachable and accessible to diverse audiences. So we print them on these big banners like this and take them around to this convergence and other types of mobilization, street protests, festivals. We also, our primary activity is to take these big banners into schools, colleges, but also high schools and middle schools, and just use art as a way, as a more interesting and engaging, outside of the box form of education about current events.
So you're talking about current events and protests. Yesterday on one of the panels, they were talking about history.
Yeah.
How does history and the way we interface with it, or how it's presented, is that a factor here in this art?
Yeah, definitely. It's the history is a really big factor, especially in this piece called Mesoamerica Resiste. It's actually a two-part image. The other one, maybe you can get some footage of it later. And it is really focused on the history of colonization and how important it is to understand that history in order to understand the context that we're in today. Because we still live in the era of colonization. It's 500 years in the making. A lot of people are taught in history class here in the United States that it's something that happened in the past and now it's over with. But we're very much right in the thick of it. And so that's one of the things that's really interesting and special about this event, bringing together Native folks and non-Native folks. It has been too rare that we have worked together and learned from each other. So I'm really happy about that. And a lot of the work that I find myself doing, especially going into high schools or colleges as well, it's oftentimes educating about history. This one, The True Cost of Coal, includes a lot of stuff, history. Here, the whole left side is about the history of the Appalachian region and also the United States more generally, to understand how it's possible that right now we can have, it's profitable to take down an entire mountain to get the last scraps of coal that are inside of it. That also has a lot to do with the history of colonization. And the strength of some of our movements has to do with the history of struggle. Like we've got references to the union movements and things of that nature in here. So I brought that up because oftentimes, especially when I'm talking to teenagers, they don't actually know anything about the history of this country. Just these strange sort of myths about Columbus and George Washington and things like that. So that type of education is actually a really important part of what we do. It helps. I oftentimes say that we are essentially telling people things that they already know in their heart is the truth, but we're reframing the way that we talk about our reality in a way that folks can come to that realization that what they know in their heart is true really is the case, and that what we learn in history class and what we hear on the news is really all just a bunch of misleading sort of, it's propaganda, frankly, yeah.
So, could you tell us a little bit how the collective began?
So the Beehive Collective began in 2000, shortly after the famous Battle of Seattle protests. That was a time when there was a lot of these counter-globalization activists who were there was like a lot of there was a lot of buzz, excuse the pun. There was a lot of activity happening around these mass mobilizations demonstrating against the World Trade Organization and the International Monetary Fund and other sort of modern-day colonial powers, and pushing this corporate neoliberal agenda. And the Beehive Collective sprang out of some people who met at some of those protests and began to develop relationships and said to themselves, we want to devote our lives to this struggle. We want to do everything in our power to shut this down, and also like everybody needs to pay their rent and like have a job and something. So that was the beginning of an artist collective that was originally conceived of as a project that would enable people to participate, spend most of their time participating in activism and a little bit of their time making something that could be sold and just sort of take care of everyone's needs. And when it first started, it was actually an all-women's hand-cut stone mosaic cooperative. And then over time, after a couple of years, someone came up with this idea of doing posters, and people realized, wait, okay, so we can make paper posters that are printed in black and white, which means they're cheap, they're mass-produced, they're accessible to thousands of people, and they can go anywhere. We like the stone mosaics, but our current situation is that they're expensive. Only one person gets to own them. They're like basically only going to rich people's homes, and the public never gets to see them. What are we doing? We're gonna make posters. And they just completely switched over to a totally new medium. And that really took off. It was immensely popular, and this whole educational element of traveling and going on tours and going to these schools, that kind of developed later over time as the group began to attract more educators who saw that these art pieces have even more potential than you artists realize they do. And it's all just been a sort of evolutionary process all along the way. Nowadays, the Beehive Collective is not really a thing anymore, but all projects have their lifespan, but there are these continuing relationships, and that's what's really important. There's several of us who think of ourselves as pollinators, or we call ourselves bees because we like to say that we are cross-pollinating the grassroots as we travel around and collect stories in different places and retell those stories as a way of inspiring people to get engaged. And there's still a bunch of folks who are engaged in that work in different ways. And I'm most excited nowadays about the new groups that are starting projects like these. There's someone here who's walking around with some posters made by a group based in Philly who made a poster called The Waterways. It's all about fracking and water and water protectors in Pennsylvania, which is really great and exciting. So it's like, in a way, the Beehive Collective kind of developed a new medium, I feel like. And now the Beehive Collective isn't around anymore, but that art style has become something that a lot of more people are really excited about. That's what I've been spending most of my time doing nowadays, is facilitating, especially I love to work with teenagers, so I've been facilitating high school students to make collaborative art projects and things of that nature. And it's really exciting. I think that doing a collaborative, creative project, especially for young people, it has the potential to be a really transformative experience, a really empowering, really showing people the incredible possibilities that we have when we work together. And when I work with students, I really use art as a gateway into activism. And
So what do you
Yeah.
think of the convergence so far? First, did you have expectations? Have they been met? Reactions?
Yeah, sure. My general reactions to the convergence so far is that I've had a wonderful time seeing a lot of friends. Especially, I've been really happy to see some folks who I haven't seen in years. You know, the GJEP folks like Rachel and Anne and Oren are all based in New England, so I actually got to meet them years ago when I first joined the Beehive Collective and was working with Rising Tide and things of that nature. I think GJEP is amazing group, does really good, important work. So that was sort of my expectation. When I heard about this, I was like, well, GJEP and IEN, I know that they're going to put on a really great event and be very sincere in their efforts, and that they're probably going to bring out some really great people, and they have certainly done that. Beyond just knowing that there would be a lot of great people here, I didn't have too much expectation because it's sort of an open-ended event, right? It's sort of like we're just going to get together and we're going to talk and we're going to figure it out. I thought the panelists who sort of did the framing and set the tone did an excellent job. I can really get down with everything that they had to say. And I'm looking forward to the continuing conversations that we have today and into tomorrow, because there's no doubt, for me at least, there's no doubt that one of the things that we absolutely must do is bring more people into our movement, our movements, plural, and also find common ground where our movements can be unified. Because with amongst all of our difference, and difference is beautiful and diversity is strength and all of that is really good, but even amongst all of our difference, we have to like come together in a really unified way if we want to actually have the impacts that we want to, because we're up against very powerful forces. And you know, we like to say that we have the power of the people, and we certainly do, but like we need thousands more to actually get it done, you know? Yeah. So that's, I feel positive about this event so far, and I think we will see what our continuing conversations hold. And I'm excited to, I hope that by the end of this weekend, by the end of Monday, that we have, we're starting to hatch some plans. You know, I'm ready. Talking is really good as a precursor to action. That's where I'm at. Yeah, I'm ready to talk, and also like let's get it done.
Well, is there anything I didn't ask you about your artwork that you wish I had? Anything else you'd like to say about anything?
I don't think so. I'll keep it short and sweet. I think I said everything I have to say about the Beehive Collective generally. If for any reason you want some, like, zoom in on a scene and do a storytelling or something of that nature, I'd be down to do that, maybe.
Let's,
I wonder which one we should pick.
yeah, let's pick one.
Let's see.
And I can move the
Let's do this one. Okay, let's focus in on this right here, the center of this one. Great. So here in the middle of the Mesoamerica Resiste graphic, you see all these different creatures are held, they're nestled in the roots of this tree of life, the ceiba tree, which is going far into the background, and it's overflowing with biodiversity coming out of the canopy of the tree. But then also here on the ground, at the grassroots level, we see all these different creatures that are engaged in different activities that are resisting colonization and the corporate development agenda. And around the edges of this scene, we see animals that are defending their land and their communities and their culture from these industrial development projects and militarism and other forms of violence that are coming from the outside. But then in the interior, we see what it is that they're protecting. And in the center, one of the most important scenes is this depiction of direct democracy. The junta, the gathering, the council, I should say. All these different creatures are coming together, and they're many different types of animals representing not only the rich biodiversity of the Central American rainforest, but the importance of cultural diversity, which is incredibly rich there as well. Some of them are bringing these flutes, representing their culture. Some of them are coming in wheelchairs, representing people with different abilities attending, making the event accessible and the importance of that. They're recording it on video and audio and in notes. These Zapatista snails are wearing the ski masks because the snails are in there. Zapatistas have chosen the snail as their sort of mascot because they say that they're really, it's a great metaphor for being humble and close to the earth and moving slowly and moving in this sort of spiraling locally rooted sort of indigenous approach to things. And we also see elders and young ones, and all these creatures are getting together. There's a skeleton animal to represent the ancestors, folks who told us stories about their experiences of resistance in Central America. They often talked about the importance of ancestors in their culture and how they feel that our ancestors are with us, present in the circle, and contributing to the conversation. And all of their voices are coming together in this swirling cloud, a sort of people's hurricane of good ideas that has this transformative power. And even the small ones with small voices are being heard. So I think that's relevant to this gathering we're having here. And it's actually a really, really important part of indigenous cultures in Central America. They have this incredible tradition of really true direct democracy. Folks talk about how if there's a problem that the community is facing, they just get everyone together and they talk about it. And they talk about it and talk about it and talk about it and talk about it as long as it takes to come up with a solution that works for everyone. And sometimes, for those of us who are really, feel like we can't escape the dominant culture in this country, sometimes that feels like, oh, it's just impossible. No one could ever possibly have enough time to go through this deliberative democracy and figure things out that actually works for everyone. But truly, it's the only way forward to really meet our needs and to really change our relationship with each other and with the earth. Oftentimes, when I'm out in the world showing this work to people, and especially at an event where people are just walking by and I only get about 10 seconds to talk to them, little sound bites and stuff like that, a lot of times, I feel like the most compelling message that I can get across is simply like, take all of this in, interpret it as you like, but just also get the message that we just need to slow down and maybe stop what we're doing for a minute so that we can reassess where have we gotten ourselves to, why do we continue hurtling headlong at breakneck speed towards the cliff. Let's just stop and maybe sit around and talk about it for a minute, like we're doing this weekend. And maybe sit around and talk about it for our entire lifetimes because it's that complicated. The action is important as well, which is why this is at the center of a big scene where lots of things are happening. It's like the deliberation and the conversation is ongoing constantly, and it's at the center, the sort of theory and practice You know, the cycle of praxis. Is implied in all of these scenes here. And you know, we bring together many scenes with many different activities as a way of just showing visually how important it is, how it takes all types, how important it is for us to be fighting back against systems of oppression from every single angle, every single day. Because that's how we build our power. I think that's all I have to say about that.